Hello again, we're back with another video, and unfortunately, if you saw my last video, you may think that we are now going to be doing gaming, but unfortunately there's been a problem with that, which is, the problem is not that we didn't have enough content. We have almost infinite content for that, but rather it's just that me, the editor, did not want to have to go through and make 50 cuts of me during the gameplay. I mean, I probably could just not do that, but I haven't thought that far ahead, and I kind of just want to keep on doing this. So yeah, that's what I have to say about this. And the thing that I saw that is the idea for this video was actually really interesting to me at the beginning, and it comes from this account called More Perfect Union. They're like pretty much a socialist group, I would argue. It's almost socialist group. They advocate for a lot of things like that. They have the sentiment of, you know, socialists, and they made a post online that actually was pretty popular. It was on Instagram, but I didn't see it originally on Instagram. It said, on Tuesday, Marco Rubio suggested Iran should spend more of its money on people rather than their military. Then, last night, at his 9 p.m. address, President Donald Trump stated that the U.S. would rather spend money on its military than its people. Now, what I'm wondering, this was actually really interesting because I thought to myself, is it equal? Should both of these countries be ideally defaulting to spending money for their people over their military? Is that what we should be doing? That's just a thought. And it results in a question that you have to ask. Does the priority of spending money on your people, like, does that priority, because that's a priority in most governments, does that decrease as the well-being of your people increases? So that means that does, like, the concern for spending money on the well-being of your citizens' lives decrease as the well-being of your people does increase? Now, we're going to ignore situations where spending money on your people increases the well-being of your people, because that is one of the main causes for it, but we're going to ignore that part right now because it will come in later. Don't worry, I'm not just throwing it out and acting like it doesn't exist. But let's actually ask the question one more time. Does the priority of spending money on your people, you know, like for welfare, decrease as the well-being of your people increases? Now, if the answer is no, then Iran and the US should both have the same priority of spending money on their people. That would be, you know, like how it would work, okay, assuming no other factors are there. Now, if the answer is yes, if the priority does decrease as the well-being of your people does increase, then we're going to need to look at something to equate that, because right now, as of now, I haven't shown you any data yet that says, okay, well, what is the well-being for each of these places? Well, we can look at a index, the Human Development Index, and this map here that is on screen right now, this is from 2023, the data is, at least. And now, of course, human development doesn't perfectly line up with the well-being of your people. I mean, look, Canada's up here, and they have had a housing crisis where it's almost impossible to purchase a nice home, and they have other problems with their economy, and there's a lot of dating issues, but it's rough. It's a rough indicator of what is it like to be in each of these places. It's a rough indicator of the quality of life. That's very simple. And so we can look at this map and we can see that America has a higher human development index than Iran. I do not know the exact figures right now. I'll put them up on screen when I learn them. So arguably, the priority for spending money on your people is less in America than in Iran. Now, I'm not saying what the actual priorities are, because, that's not what they're actually doing right now, but in terms of what they would be doing in this system where we just ignore other factors, it's a controlled environment. But now this is where that factor that I mentioned earlier comes in. What if the welfare spending, or spending money on the well-being of the citizens, is the reason why we are all the way up there? And something we may notice is that nations with good per capita welfare spending tend to be higher on this list or chart or index than nations who are not. So you can take that and you can say that let's assume that it takes more welfare than before to bring your country to a higher level of this human development index. We're treating a level as a color, and we're trying to reach 1 because 1 is the highest amount. I think the figures I gave you might have indicated that. If we, per capita and for each economy size, Iran should be spending way more on welfare and other things related to human development than America. Now, let's really quickly give a important thing to note here. It's that in terms of welfare, specifically welfare, because human well-being and welfare are not the same, or, like what we spend welfare on, what we think of when we think of welfare, is not the same thing as well-being. Because if we take a place like Germany, or we take a place like Norway, these places are even darker on the index than America or Canada or the UK, and we can probably guess that these places are maxed out. Like, if you gave them more welfare, it's probably not going to do much, right? That should make complete and total sense. If you give them like $1 billion more in welfare spending, their human development index is barely at all going to change, if at any, because a lot of these countries have literally designed their welfare systems to use a certain amount of money, and they have good, efficient, and effective welfare systems, and so just giving it more money isn't always going to help. And if we take a country like Iceland, they have a ton of welfare, and it's great to live there, and they're number 1 on the Human Development Index, but they're still not at a 1. In order to reach a 1, your country would need to be the most perfect place ever. Imagine it like heaven. It'd have to be essentially heaven, and that's really going to be impossible for any country to achieve. So in order for, let's say, Iceland to get a 1 on the Human Development Index, it's not impossible like making heaven is, but the amount of effort required to do so would be insane. It would be huge, and no one wants to try and do that because, the care to do that, it's just not as great, because already the people here are living fantastically. Why should we change it at all? And this brings me to the next natural conclusion here, okay? So we've established actually that Iran is obligated, or they should have a much bigger pound for pound spending on its people, because they are a farther distance away from the Human Development Index goal of 1. And so when you scale it for population per capita, Iran's going to have to spend way more than America, because not only would they have to get to where we were, but then also reach 1. We only have to reach 1 because we already are where we are on the Human Development Index. But once your nation has gotten so high on the rankings of this Human Development Index, or it has just reached a really high number on it, that you really can't go any farther without a huge amount of investment into your country that no one would ever want to do, right? Because, Iceland, no one's going to be investing to hundreds of billions of dollars in Iceland to make a number reach 1. And after you get to this point, though, you can pretty confidently expand your military. And the thing is, the priority of military spending, it doesn't change as your Human Development Index goes up or down. Like, it's probably going to just stay where it is, or it's going to change, but not because your human development index changed. But as your people are living better and better, you can focus less on making sure your people are living well, and you get the leeway or leg room, though I don't use that word for this a lot, necessary to look at other things, right? And so if we have, let's say we have a nation where spending on its people is 70% priority and the military is 30% priority. As the nation gets closer and closer to the priority of spending on its people, and it's like meeting that priority as it, inevitably, or not inevitably, but gets closer and closer to the HDI of 1, it can start to think to itself, okay, so the amount that it's taking, the amount it requires to make our country any better is so huge relative to our nation's size, think of Iceland here, that at this point, maybe we can move on to something else. And they've done that. It's not like they have to keep on adding more and more welfare spending. If they just keep it where it is, it's fine, but naturally the economy is going to grow, their revenue is still going to grow, and so they're eventually going to be able to have the money necessary to be able to spend on the military. Now, we'll say that redirecting from civilian to military spending can decrease human well-being, but one, that would mean you have to do it in a careful manner to make sure that your population does not suffer or for your military. Or you could literally just wait for your economy to grow large enough to the point where you can afford a military without having to do it. Or you could just take the budget surplus from your country and invest it, and then you can get it way quicker. So, what do I think? Well, you could reach a point in your country where spending more money on improving the human development index of your country is not really important. You could reach that point, and at that point there, it's gonna make more sense to spend on your military. So you could say at that point, I'd rather spend more money on my military than my people. And of course, it sounds all wrong. Oh, why is he doing that? Why is he doing that? But one, why would your people care when they're living great? And two, I mean, that's all it is. It's just a thing that sounds, rude to people. But, it's not really. And so if we look back at this post, originally, I think that Iran should spend more of its money on people rather than the military. Or, ideally it would. But at the same time, the U.S. could spend more money on its military than its people, and arguably, just because a nation spends more on one thing or another doesn't mean it would rather spend money on that thing over a smaller thing in its budget. But we can guess that there's a rough pattern with that. But yeah, that's really what I have to say for this. I just thought this was really interesting because it actually made me think, how can you equate this? How can you equate this? And remember, this is all based on that question that I asked near, more towards the start of this video. Does the priority of spending money on your people, again, welfare spending, government spending on the people, decrease as the well-being of your people increases? You could say it doesn't. You could say that, well, this priority is insanely important, and I think that it just never changes. But, I mean, I would have to disagree. I think that it's not a perfect curve. I don't think that increasing the amount that you spend on your people by a certain amount will always lead to the priority being this amount less. I think that it's more of a scale where, for a lot of it, it tends to not change that much, and then it becomes exponential at some point. Maybe towards, where the human development index of your country reaches, maybe where America is, for example. But yeah, that's all I really had to say. I'm going to have a lot of fun editing everything that I just said. But yeah, I'll speak to you soon in the outro. Okay, we're at the outro. I'm surprised that I even finished editing this before 10 o'clock Central Time, and yeah, I really don't feel like making a long outro, so peace, guys.